Before we start the story, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. It's funny what people do with grief. Some drink, some drown themselves in work, some just close the door on everyone. For me, I thought I could bury mine in the wilderness, lose myself in the quiet of the mountains where the world shrinks down to what you can touch and see, nothing more. And Lost Creek, a secluded spot in Rocky Mountain National Park, seemed like just the place for that. Lily, my wife, had always wanted to go there. She'd pull up pictures of the Rockies and tell me, "Someday, Jack, we'll go and live like we're the only people on Earth." But someday never came. After she died, I tried everything to move on, but nothing worked, so I bought an RV, packed up, and headed to the place she'd dreamed of. Maybe I hoped she'd be there somehow, in the trees or the water. That's what I told myself anyway. The road up to Lost Creek is narrow and winding, lined with old pines that reach so high they block out the sky. I didn't see another car once I passed the last campsite 10 miles back. Just me in the silence, my RV's engine humming against the quiet. When I reached Lost Creek, I parked and stepped out, the air cold and biting, even in the middle of August. The creek itself was smaller than I'd expected, a thin, winding stream that curved through the rocky landscape, clear and cold. I set up camp just a few feet from the water, the RV nestled between two large boulders, feeling more exposed than I was comfortable with. But that was the point, right? To face whatever I'd been running from, or so I thought. The first night was strange. The air felt thick, almost charged, as if the whole place was waiting for something. I chalked it up to the altitude, or maybe just nerves. After all, it had been months since I'd tried camping alone, especially somewhere as remote as Lost Creek. I made myself dinner, then lay in the RV, listening to the faint trickle of water outside. I drifted off to sleep with memories of Lily coming back to me. Her laugh, the way she'd run ahead on hiking trails and then turn, waiting for me to catch up. But then, I started to dream. In the dream, Lily was standing by the creek, her back to me. I could see her auburn hair, her favorite jacket, the one she wore on every trip. She was calling my name, but her voice was off, distant, like it was echoing through a tunnel. "Jack, Jack, come here." I tried to reach out to touch her shoulder, but my hand passed right through her. I woke up with a start, cold sweat on my neck, her voice still ringing in my ears. The next day, I tried to shake it off. I spent hours hiking, exploring the area, trying to wear myself out, but no matter where I went, it felt like something was watching me from the trees. There's a type of silence that only comes in the wilderness, a dead silence where not even the birds chirp. And that was Lost Creek, quiet, eerie, like the whole forest was holding its breath. When I got back to the RV that afternoon, the air felt different, warmer, almost inviting, and there was this faint scent, floral, familiar. It smelled like her perfume. I thought maybe I was just imagining it. But when I closed my eyes, it felt like Lily was right there beside me. I shook my head, trying to clear the feeling. I hadn't brought anything of hers. I'd left all her things at home. But the smell didn't go away. It lingered, taunting me, drawing me back into memories I wasn't ready for. That night, the fog rolled in thick and fast, wrapping around the RV like a shroud. It was as if the whole world had disappeared, and all that was left was me and the faint glow of my flashlight reflecting off the foggy windows. I couldn't sleep, so I sat by the window, staring out into the night. my mind replaying moments with Lily on an endless loop. But then, in the stillness, I saw something. Just beyond the edge of the creek, where the fog was heaviest, there was a figure. It was faint, more of a shadow than a person, but I knew it was her. I felt it in my gut. "Lily?" I whispered, my breath fogging up the glass. The figure didn't move, didn't even turn, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was looking right at me. I stepped outside, the fog swirling around me, cold and damp. My flashlight cut through it, but the beam seemed to weaken the farther I walked. And there she was, standing just beyond the creek, her outline barely visible in the mist. She looked so real, so solid, I almost reached out to touch her. "Jack," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper, "come closer." My heart was pounding, a mix of fear and longing that I couldn't ignore. I took a step forward, then another, my feet sinking into the soft earth by the creek. But something held me back, an instinct, a gut feeling that told me to stay put. "Lily," I said, louder this time, "is that really you?" The figure tilted its head, and for a moment, it looked just like her. The same gentle smile, the same light in her eyes. But then something changed. Her face shifted, her eyes growing hollow, dark, her mouth widening into a grin that wasn't hers. I stumbled back, the flashlight shaking in my hand. The figure faded into the fog, leaving only the faint sound of water and my own ragged breathing. I bolted back to the RV, slamming the door shut, my hands shaking. "It's just your mind playing tricks," I muttered, trying to steady myself. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Something was out there and it was using Lily's memory against me. The third night was worse. I could barely sleep, kept awake by the faint sound of footsteps circling the RV, soft, barely there, but constant. They'd stop for a moment, then start again, pacing, always just outside my field of vision. I clutched Lily's old bracelet, the one thing of hers I'd allowed myself to bring, feeling the weight of it against my skin. It grounded me, reminded me of who she was, who I was. At dawn, I finally had enough. I was packing up, getting ready to leave, when I heard a knock on the RV door. My heart nearly stopped. I opened it to find a park ranger, an older man with a weathered face and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. "You all right, son?" he asked, glancing at me like he already knew the answer. I think so," I managed, though my voice sounded weak. He looked past me, toward the creek, and shook his head. "You know the legend around here?" "Legend?" I asked, trying to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. But he looked dead serious. "They call it the Phantom of Lost Creek. Locals say there's a spirit that haunts these parts, luring folks who are grieving. It shows itself as someone they lost, someone they want back, but it's not them, it's just something else, trying to pull you under." I felt a chill go down my spine. "That's ridiculous." He shrugged. "Believe what you want, but I'd suggest packing up and getting out while you still can. Not everyone who camps here comes back the same." He left, his footsteps crunching on the gravel, leaving me alone with the silence and the fog. But his words stuck with me. Was it true? Was there really something out here? Something that fed on grief? That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, gripping Lily's bracelet, waiting. And just after midnight, I saw her again. Standing by the creek, her figure clearer than ever, her eyes sad and hollow. She raised a hand, beckoning. "Come to me, Jack," she whispered, her voice as familiar as my own heartbeat. "Don't leave me." My heart ached, a painful longing that gnawed at my chest, but I forced myself to stay put, to hold on to the memory of who she really was. "You're not her," I whispered, my voice breaking. "You're not Lily." The figure's face twisted, her smile stretching wider, too wide until it was nothing but darkness. She stepped closer, her footsteps echoing in the stillness, and I felt a pull, a tug at my very soul, urging me to cross the creek, to follow her into the fog. I fought it with everything I had, clutching the bracelet until it left marks on my skin. "Lily wouldn't want this," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "She'd want me to live." The figure stopped, its eyes narrowing, and for a moment the sadness turned to rage. The fog thickened, pressing against the RV like a living thing, but I stayed where I was, refusing to give in. The figure screamed, a sound that shattered the silence, a piercing, inhuman wail that echoed through the trees. And then, just as suddenly as it had come, the fog lifted and the figure was gone. The air felt lighter, the silence broken by the faint rustle of leaves in the morning breeze. I sat there, shaken, feeling the weight of everything that had happened settle over me. As the first light of dawn crept over the mountains, I packed up, leaving Lost Creek and its haunting behind. The memory of Lily felt different now, bittersweet but peaceful, like I'd finally laid something to rest. Driving away, I glanced back at the creek one last time, half expecting to see her shadow standing by the water. But it was empty, just the quiet stream winding through the rocks, nothing more. And yet, as I turned back to the road, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, something ancient and hungry left behind in the shadows of Lost Creek. When you decide to live out of an RV, there are two things you learn pretty quickly: how to keep yourself entertained alone, and how to get by without reliable cell service. Most of the time, I don't mind the isolation. It's why I left my old life, after all. But Death Valley is different. It's the kind of isolation that you feel in your bones, the kind that makes the air heavier, your own thoughts louder. Even so, I came here on purpose. There was something enticing about the desolation, the silence, and the heat. For a few days, I could pretend I was the only person on Earth. I was camping near Rhyolite, an old ghost town on the outskirts of Death Valley, and figured it'd make for a decent story for my blog, a little adventure that my readers would eat up. After a long day of hiking, I returned to my RV, feeling the burn in my legs and the satisfying ache of a good day's work. I checked my phone, knowing I wouldn't get service, but hoping for a signal all the same. Nothing. Just that little spinning wheel and a screen full of missed connections. The sun was sinking behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the desert. I sat on the edge of the RV's tiny bed, sipping from my water bottle and enjoying the silence. Then the radio crackled. I froze, mid-sip, staring at the old CB radio mounted near the dashboard. I hadn't even turned it on, and I never bothered with it. This deep in the desert, I didn't expect to pick up much of anything. But there it was, faint and crackling with static, an old signal buzzing to life in the stillness. "Can hear me?" The voice was soft, a whisper that seemed to struggle through the interference. My heart raced as I leaned forward, grabbing the radio receiver. I had no idea who would be broadcasting out here, but the voice sounded desperate, and that's something I couldn't ignore. "Hello, I said, pressing the button to reply. "This is Ethan Clark. Can you hear me?" For a moment, there was only static. I waited, watching the dying sunlight cast strange shadows on the empty desert outside. Then the voice came again, just a whisper. "Can you hear me?" It was the same phrase, repeated exactly as before. The voice was strange, like it was recorded, almost robotic in tone. But there was something pleading in it, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I shook my head, putting the receiver back on its hook. "Probably just some old broadcast," I muttered to myself, trying to ignore the feeling gnawing at my stomach. But as I prepared my dinner and settled down for the night, I couldn't shake the voice. It was faint, but insistent, like it was stuck in my head. Sleep didn't come easily. When I finally dozed off, the dream came. I was wandering through the desert, lost and parched, the heat beating down on me. Ahead, I saw something, walking just out of reach, a shadow in the heat waves, calling out in a voice I knew I'd heard before. I woke up in a cold sweat, the air around me hot and thick, even in the early hours of morning. Outside, the world was still, the silence pressing in like a weight. I sat up, my breath heavy, and grabbed my water bottle, taking a long drink as I tried to clear the dream from my mind. The desert had a way of playing tricks, but this felt too real. The radio crackled again. This time the voice was clearer, louder. "Help me." It was a man's voice, a voice that sounded hauntingly familiar. "Please, don't leave me here." I grabbed the receiver, a nervous laugh escaping me. "All right, if this is some kind of joke, it's not funny." But there was no response. Only static, fading in and out like a heartbeat. That day, I tried to shake it off. I explored the ruins of Rhyolite, snapping pictures of the old crumbling buildings, relics of a town that died a century ago. Every so often, I'd look over my shoulder, feeling as though someone was watching me. But the town was empty, its silence absolute. By sunset, the feeling of unease had only grown. I returned to my RV, planning to sleep and leave first thing in the morning. This place was starting to get to me, and I didn't like it. Just as I was about to turn in, the radio came alive once more. The voice was loud, clear, and desperate. "Ethan, can you hear me?" I froze, my blood running cold. This time, there was no mistaking it. The voice on the other end, it was my own. "Ethan, don't leave, please. I'm still here." I stumbled back, staring at the radio as if it might reach out and grab me. How was that possible? It was my voice, my exact tone, pleading in a way that I'd never heard before. I picked up the receiver, my hand shaking. "This isn't funny," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Whoever you are, you need to stop." But the voice continued, fading in and out, repeating the same phrases over and over. "Help me. Don't leave me here." I knew I should leave. Every instinct told me to pack up, get in the RV, and drive as far from Death Valley as I could. But I felt something else too, a compulsion, a pull, urging me to stay. I told myself it was curiosity, the need to understand what was happening. But deep down, I knew it was something else, something stronger. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Instead, I sat by the window, watching the empty desert, waiting for... I didn't even know what. The moon cast an eerie glow over the landscape, illuminating the ghostly shapes of the Rhyolite ruins. And then, just before dawn, I saw it. A figure, standing just outside the RV. It was a man, his features shadowed, but I could make out the shape of his face, his clothes. He looked like me. He raised a hand, beckoning, his eyes hollow and empty, reflecting the faint light like a pair of dark mirrors. "Ethan," he whispered, his voice just a whisper on the wind. "Don't leave me." My chest tightened, fear rooted me in place. The figure took a step closer and I could feel the cold seeping through the RV walls, a chill that didn't belong in the desert. I scrambled back, grabbing my keys, ready to make a run for it. Then the radio crackled, louder than before. "Don't go, Ethan. You can't leave." The voice was pleading, desperate, like it was fighting for survival. It sounded exactly like me, too much like me. I looked out the window again, and the figure was gone, leaving only the empty desert stretching out before me. I didn't waste any time. I started the engine, my heart pounding as I pulled away from the campsite, driving as fast as the RV would go down the rough desert road. The radio kept crackling, the voice fading in and out, begging me to come back. But I didn't stop, didn't look back. I just kept driving, putting as much distance between myself and that voice as I could. As I drove, the sun rose, casting a golden light over the desert. The terror that had gripped me all night began to fade, replaced by a numb exhaustion. I told myself it was over, that I'd escaped whatever nightmare had taken hold of me in Death Valley. But then the radio crackled one last time. The voice was faint, almost drowned out by the static, but I could still hear it. "Ethan, I'm still here." I shut off the radio, my hands shaking, and kept my eyes on the road, refusing to acknowledge the chill that settled over me. I knew I'd never come back to Death Valley, but I also knew I'd never forget that voice, the voice that sounded like mine, calling out from somewhere beyond, begging me not to leave. And deep down, I knew that part of me never had. I don't scare easily. That's kind of my thing. I've explored every abandoned place within 100 miles of Miami, wandered ghost towns at night, and camped in parts of Florida even locals avoid. So, when I planned a trip to Okala National Forest, Florida's green heart of swamp and wilderness, it was supposed to be another adventure, nothing more. But Okala had other plans. I'm Jess, 27, and with a thrill-seeking blog to keep up with, my job is getting myself into risky situations and coming out with the story. This time, I wasn't alone. I was meeting up with Sam, a photographer I knew from a ghost hunting forum. Sam was quieter, more cautious than me, but I figured he'd balance out my enthusiasm. At least, that's what I thought when we pulled into the forest and parked the RV. The campground was empty, and the silence felt weirdly dense. The trees loomed, casting thick shadows even in daylight. Sam leaned out the window, staring into the swamp like he was looking for something. "It's beautiful, right?" I grinned, nudging him with my elbow. "Pure nature, untouched by people." Sam didn't laugh. "It's definitely something. Let's not underestimate this place." I rolled my eyes. "Come on, we're here for a good time, not an overthinking contest." With the RV parked and our campsite set up, I took out my camera to capture the mist that settled like a blanket over the swamp. Just as I clicked, though, my camera flickered. First the image, then the whole screen went black. I tapped it, and nothing. Dead as a rock. My heart sank. This was my good camera. The one that had never failed me. "Looks like you've angered the swamp spirits," Sam said, smirking as he checked his own camera. "Oh, please, just a tech glitch," but it bothered me more than I let on. By dusk, the swamp transformed. Thick shadows crawled across the ground and the air smelled faintly rotten, like something left out too long. But I told myself it was just the swamp, organic decay or something like that. We settled in by the RV, just talking about photography techniques and the ghost stories we'd read online, the atmosphere light and easy, until the smell got stronger. "Do you smell that?" I asked, wrinkling my nose. It was putrid, like a mix of sulfur and rotten eggs. Sam nodded, his face a little pale. "Yeah, it's stronger now. Could be swamp gas." We both laughed it off, but there was an uneasiness in the air that neither of us could shake. That night, the swamp kept whispering, strange rustlings, faint trickles of water, and then, unmistakably, voices. "Jess," someone whispered. I jolted, looking around. "Jess!" It was my own voice, echoing out of the darkness. "Did you just hear that?" I whispered to Sam, feeling my heart race. He nodded, his face ashen. "It sounded like you." My brain was working overtime, trying to rationalize. Maybe it was some kind of echo, or animals making sounds that mimicked voices, but that wasn't the end. Soon there were footsteps, soft, almost like padding, circling the RV. We both turned on our flashlights, sweeping the area. Nothing. "Sam, we should check outside," I said, feeling bold though my hands were shaking. He shook his head. "No way. We don't know what's out there. And didn't we agree this place was creepy?" "Fine. Stay here," I said, more out of pride than anything else. I opened the RV door and stepped out into the mist. The stench was worse outside, suffocatingly strong, and the silence was eerie, like the whole swamp was holding its breath. I shone my flashlight toward the edge of the water, squinting. There was something. A hunched shadow moving just out of sight, half hidden by the trees. "Hey, who's there?" I shouted, though my voice cracked halfway. The shadow stopped, head tilting toward me as if it was listening. Then, with a swift, unnatural movement, it vanished into the darkness. My pulse thudded in my ears as I backed up into the RV, slamming the door shut. "There was someone or something out there," I stammered, locking the door. "Yeah," Sam C. muttered, looking more scared than I'd ever seen him. "I've heard of this thing called the skunk ape. Locals say it's some kind of swamp creature, and it's always been tied to Okala. Maybe we're poking around where we shouldn't." "Seriously, Sam, you believe that stuff?" I laughed, though the sound was hollow. "It's probably just animals messing with us." We sat there in silence, listening to the swamp close in around us. The whispering, the footsteps, they didn't stop. And that night, as the hours crawled by, I felt something new. Eyes on us, watching from just beyond the light. The figure would appear at the edges of the trees, then disappear, taunting us. Sam's patience wore thin by the early hours. "Jess, this is insane. Let's get out of here. Now." "Come on. We're safe in the RV," I insisted. But deep down I was terrified. The skunk ape legend seemed less ridiculous now. "Just a few more hours till morning. Then we'll go." We must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, the RV was shaking, rocking violently side to side. My heart stopped as the roar of some animal, a deafening, guttural sound, filled the air. "Sam!" I screamed, clinging to the seat. "What the hell is happening?" "It's trying to get in," he whispered, eyes wide, voice trembling. The creature's shadow loomed at the window, its outline massive, and then, with a heavy thud, it began scratching against the metal, slow and deliberate. The sound was like nails on a chalkboard, dragging along the door, followed by another, stronger bang. It was testing us, seeing if we would break. "What does it want?" I gasped, looking at Sam. His face was as pale as mine felt. Sam swallowed, glancing around for anything we could use as a weapon. "There's a belief among some locals that leaving offerings keep spirits at bay. I don't know if it's true, but maybe we should try it." I wasn't one for superstitions, but I didn't have any better ideas. So we gathered what little we had, a couple of trinkets, food from the pantry, and even a small necklace I'd brought from home. Hands shaken, I placed the items outside, whispering, "Here, take it. Leave us alone." The swamp went silent. We waited, breaths held, hoping, praying. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. Then the stench faded, like a storm passing. The creature's heavy footsteps retreated, sinking back into the swamp. We sat in the quiet, not daring to speak until the first light of dawn broke through the trees. The relief was overwhelming, but so was the fear that every little noise or shadow might mean it was still out there, waiting. With no working equipment and a dying RV battery, we didn't waste time. As we packed up, I glanced back at the forest, still feeling the weight of unseen eyes. "Do you think it's gone?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Sam just shook his head. "I don't think creatures like that leave. They just wait." We drove in the tense silence, the trees blurring by, the sunlight feeling alien after the night we'd endured. It wasn't until we reached the edge of the forest that I felt like I could breathe again. But even as we sped away, my eyes kept drifting to the rearview mirror, expecting to see that shadow, that figure. And then, as we rounded a corner and Okala disappeared behind us, I swear I saw it. Just a glimpse. A dark, hunched figure at the forest's edge, watching us drive away. I looked away, but the image lingered, seared into my mind. Sam and I never spoke about Okala again. We'd left the swamp, but it hadn't left us. The smell, the scratches on the RV, the feeling that we'd been marked for life, those things stayed. So, if you're ever tempted to explore Okala, to see the swamp for yourself, don't. And if you hear someone calling your name or feel something watching you from the dark, don't look back. Because in Okala, something ancient and hungry still waits in the devil's playground. And it never forgets. When I parked my RV at a secluded site by Lake Shasta, I was certain it was exactly what I needed. Quiet, solitude, a whole week to clear my mind, paint, and forget the chaos I'd left behind. Just me, the forest, and my sketchbook, with no one to answer to. The forest here was dense, shadows clinging to the underbrush, only letting glimpses of the lake shimmer through the trees. The first few days were peaceful enough. I spent mornings sketching, afternoons exploring the woods, and nights watching the stars brighten over the lake, the water a dark, almost velvety black. But things started going wrong on the third night when my generator began to fail. I was sitting outside, wrapping up a long evening of painting, when the lights in the RV flickered. At first, I figured it was a hiccup in the system. Maybe I hadn't charged it properly. But after a few hours of flickering and the lights finally gave out, plunging the campsite into complete darkness. "No big deal," I muttered to myself. I tried to stay calm as I grabbed my flashlight and ducked into the RV, rummaging through my tools to troubleshoot. Nothing worked. I sat in the dark for a while, the silence pressing in from the trees around me. Just as I was deciding to go to bed, I caught sight of something out of the corner of my eye. A faint, bluish light flickering far off through the trees. It was strange, like a lantern but with an unnatural steady glow. For a second, I thought maybe someone else was out there camping. But then, the light blinked out. I squinted into the darkness, feeling the quiet seep into my bones, the stillness sharper somehow. Finally, I shook myself and went to bed, chalking it up to someone passing through. The next morning, my generator seemed fine. I chalked it up to bad wiring, though the RV was only a few years old. I spent the day painting, distractedly glancing into the trees every now and then, wondering if I'd catch a flash of that light again. When night fell, the lights in the RV went out once more. But that wasn't what disturbed me most. The light was back, closer this time. It glowed just beyond the tree line, hovering, soft but unmistakable. And it wasn't alone. There were 3 distinct orbs now, flickering and shifting between the trees as if moving, watching. They floated at the edge of my vision, too far to be close, but close enough to unsettle me. "Who's there?" I shouted, trying to sound tougher than I felt. The lights blinked out as soon as I called out. I stayed outside a while watching, flashlight held tight, but the silence stretched on and on. I finally gave up, retreating to my RV, trying to ignore the tight feeling in my chest. That night, I barely slept, listening to the wind stirring the trees, the faint scratching of branches against the RV, and something else. A whispering sound I couldn't quite make out, soft but steady, like a voice carried on the breeze. The next morning, I woke up groggy, more annoyed than scared. I opened the door to get some air and found strange, small handprints smeared into the dust on the RV's windows, almost child-sized but distorted, like someone had dragged their fingers across the glass. A chill went through me as I ran my hand over the glass. I tried to brush the prints off, but they wouldn't budge. They'd imprinted on the glass, like they'd been burned into it. I spent the day trying to shake the uneasy feeling, hoping some fresh air would clear my head. But no matter how hard I tried, I kept glancing back toward the trees, thinking I'd catch a glimpse of something watching me. That evening, I spotted them again. This time, the lights weren't just near the tree line. They were on the ridge above the lake. As the sun went down, they appeared one by one, flickering, unblinking, almost like eyes. I could see them clearly now, shadowy figures standing along the ridge, barely discernible in the fading light. A knot of dread twisted in my gut. I tried to tell myself it was just campers, maybe hikers who'd wandered off trail, but they didn't move. They just stood there, watching. As night crept in, I could feel their gaze, as if the whole forest had come alive with the weight of their stares. I bolted back inside the RV, drawing the blinds and locking the doors. I told myself I'd head home in the morning. Whatever I'd come here to find wasn't worth another night of sleepless terror. But sleep didn't come easy. I tossed and turned, glancing toward the door every few minutes, until finally, sometime past midnight, I drifted off. I don't know what woke me, but when I opened my eyes, the RV was pitch black. I fumbled for my flashlight, but before I could switch it on, I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. Someone, or something, was tapping on the window. I froze, my heart hammering. The tapping was soft, almost rhythmic, like a lullaby. I stayed motionless, holding my breath, hoping it would stop. But the tapping grew louder, more insistent, moving from one window to the next, as if whatever was out there was circling the RV, looking for a way inside. I had to see. I reached for the curtain, hesitating for a second before pulling it back. And there, pressed against the glass, was a hand. Pale, almost translucent, with long, thin fingers that stretched across the window. My blood went cold. The hand slowly dragged itself down the glass, leaving a faint, misty print in its wake before it disappeared into the shadows. I stumbled back, barely able to keep from screaming. My only thought was to get out of there. I grabbed my bag, shoving what little I could find inside, and rushed toward the driver's seat. But as I reached the front of the RV, I froze. There, at the edge of the forest, stood the figures, dark, motionless, with glowing blue eyes that stared back at me. There had to be at least half a dozen of them, shadows blending with the trees, but their eyes cut through the darkness like stars, watching every movement I made. I threw the RV into reverse, the tires spinning in the gravel as I backed up, my gaze fixed on those figures. They didn't move, but I could feel them, their eyes following me as I turned the RV, gripping the wheel tight as I sped down the winding forest road. The forest closed in around me, the road barely visible in the weak beams of my headlights. The shadowy figures melted into the trees as I drove, but every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw those eyes, hovering just at the edge of the road, unblinking, as if they were still watching, still waiting. When I finally broke free of the trees, reaching the main road, I felt a weight lift from my chest. I didn't stop until I was miles away, my knuckles white on the wheel, the memory of those eyes burned into my mind. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. Late at night, in the quiet of my apartment, I'll catch a glimpse of a soft blue glow out of the corner of my eye, or hear the faintest tap against my window, and every time I remember those dark figures on the ridge, waiting, watching. I know it sounds impossible, but I swear they followed me home. I'd done hundreds of trips through the Great Smoky Mountains. It was hard to get spooked when you knew the woods better than your own backyard. But here I was, heart pounding, trying to convince myself I was hearing nothing but wind. The whole thing started because Amber had read too many campfire tales about the Smokies. She was tagging along with her friend Lily, some writer, on an inspiration trip, whatever that meant. But I owed her a favor, so I agreed to lead the way, help them find this rumored Cherokee burial site or whatever her article was supposed to be about. My old friend Max came along too, ready to burn off some work stress, and I figured it'd be a chance to catch up and make fun of Amber's ghost hunting at the same time. But then things started going wrong, and we hadn't even set foot on the trail yet. Max's tent poles were missing right off the bat. I checked the gear 3 times before we left, but somehow they'd just vanished. Max cursed under his breath, propping up the tent with a bunch of dead wood he found lying around. As if that wasn't enough, his flashlight started acting up, flickering like some horror movie prop. I had to bite my tongue, swallowing my urge to laugh when I saw the way Lily's eyes widened with each flicker of light. She probably thinks it's some kind of omen, I muttered to Max as we packed up the next morning. He gave a humorless laugh. The hike itself was decent enough at first, winding through thick pines, our only company the quiet crunch of leaves and occasional calls of distant birds. That's when Amber stopped, her hand frozen mid-air as if she'd been caught reaching for some invisible switch. "Do you see that?" she asked, voice barely a whisper. What? I looked around, expecting to see an animal, maybe a fox or something. She pointed to a tree not 20 feet away. Claw marks were scratched into the trunk, deep and deliberate, and underneath there were strange symbols scratched into the bark. Cherokee, by the look of it. Probably some teens marking up the place, I said, brushing it off, or a bear sharpening its claws. But Amber didn't look convinced. And, truth be told, I felt that unsettling tickle at the back of my mind, too. There was something about those symbols that felt watchful. We walked a few more miles, the trail twisting into itself. I'd done this trek 100 times, but the dense fog that had rolled in made it all look foreign. Even I could admit we seemed to be moving in circles, though I'd never admit it out loud. That night, as we set up our ragged camp, Amber and Lily started in on the local legends, and it was clear she wanted to spook us. She told us about Spearfinger, the stone-skinned witch who could mimic voices and had a finger sharp as a spear. It was supposed to be Cherokee folklore, and I figured it was just another way of trying to scare the new kids in town. Still, Lily looked pale and fidgeted with the edge of her jacket, eyes darting around the trees as if waiting for that very witch to appear. But that was nothing compared to what came next. We settled down, trying to find sleep under a sky that felt far too close. Then, somewhere in the middle of the night, I woke to the sound of Lily's scream. She was sitting up, clutching her chest, tears in her eyes. She was tapping on my chest, Lily gasped. I could feel it, right here. She pointed to her heart, her skin already turning a sickly yellow-green where her finger rested. Amber went pale, and Max shifted uncomfortably. I knew what they were thinking. None of us could shake that image of Spearfinger Amber had painted earlier, of that sharp, spear-like finger reaching into a person's chest. And Lily's skin didn't look bruised. It looked burned. Morning couldn't come soon enough. But things only got worse. We spent the day in tense silence, the fog heavier now, muting the world around us. Twice, I thought I saw someone watching us from the tree line. Just a shadow, a trick of the light, or maybe the fog was messing with me. But the image stayed burned in my brain. A silhouette, tall and twisted, lurking just out of reach. Around noon, I heard Max calling for me, his voice thick with worry. "Jared, over here!" I headed toward the sound, rounding the ridge, only to find Max at camp, staring blankly as if he hadn't moved at all. "What are you doing, Jared?" "I thought you called me." Amber's hand went to her mouth, her face a mix of horror and fascination. "Spearfinger," she whispered. "She can mimic voices, lure you away." I told her to knock it off, but the unease had already settled over us like a fog of its own. Each step forward felt like we were sinking deeper into something, like we were walking right into the jaws of some hungry thing that waited, patient and silent. That night, everything broke down. Max's flashlight turned back on, but it wasn't just flickering. It seemed to light up every time he looked away from the others, casting strange, elongated shadows in the trees that seemed to ripple and breathe. The firelight flickered low, and just outside its edge I could have sworn I saw a figure, stone-like, her finger outstretched, watching us. Amber was the one who saw it clearly first. "Jared," she hissed, grabbing my arm with a strength that surprised me. "Look." Spearfinger stood not 20 feet away, skin glistening like polished stone, her spear-like finger glinting in the low firelight. She didn't move, didn't blink, but her mouth twisted up into a smile, the kind that doesn't belong on any human face. I felt something turn cold in my gut. "Ritual?" Amber whispered, her voice trembling. "The Cherokee. They had rituals to ward her off." "What are you talking about?" Max snapped, his voice rough but his face drained of color. Amber ignored him, grabbing rocks, sticks, anything she could find, laying them in a rough circle around the fire. She whispered words under her breath, Cherokee chants she'd learned in her research. I thought she was crazy, but then, just as she finished, everything went silent. Even the wind died down, and the fog seemed to pull back, giving us a bubble of stillness. But Spearfinger just stared at us, that finger tracing patterns in the air as if she was mocking us, watching with a hunger that made my skin crawl. "It's not working," Lily whispered, voice thick with tears. For a second, just a second, I saw something in Spearfinger's eyes, something that looked almost like pity, and that scared me worse than anything else. Then she moved, gliding closer, her stone finger outstretched, pointing right at Lily. Before I knew it, I was standing between them. It wasn't bravery, just a blind, stupid instinct to shield her. I reached out to touch Spearfinger, to push her back, and that's when her stone skin seared my palm, pain shooting up my arm like fire. I staggered, clutching my hand, but she didn't even look at me. Her gaze locked on Lily as if I were nothing but air. "Get her out of here," I said through gritted teeth, backing away, trying to draw Spearfinger's attention. Amber and Max grabbed Lily and we took off, bolting down the trail. Every few steps, I'd glance back, half expecting Spearfinger to be right behind me, that stone finger poised to pierce my chest. But she was gone, swallowed by the fog. After what felt like hours, we finally saw the gleam of metal in the distance. The car, still parked at the trailhead. Relief flooded through me, and we all piled inside, barely able to breathe, let alone speak. I fumbled for the keys, hands shaking, and started the car, pulling onto the road as fast as I could without looking back. The fog lifted as we drove down the mountain, but the weight in my chest didn't. Every time I checked the rearview mirror, I thought I'd see her watching us, her stone finger raised to her lips, telling us to stay silent. But there was nothing, only the road stretching out ahead of us. We never talked about it after that. No one would believe us anyway. But I know one thing for sure. I'm never going back to those mountains, and every now and then, in the dead of night, I still feel a cold, sharp touch on my chest, like she's reaching out from the dark, reminding me that some things are better left alone. I should have known better than to camp alone at Blackwater Ridge. I'd been traveling solo for years, used to the silence of the wilderness and the peace it gave me, but there was something different about this place. The silence here wasn't common, it was hollow. The kind of silence that seemed to press in, almost alive, watching. Maybe it was the timing. My head wasn't exactly in the right place, not after everything that had happened in the last few months. The breakup, losing the stability I'd spent years building. It's funny, really. I came here to clear my head, to get away, to forget for a while. But it didn't take long for that familiar unease to settle in, a weight in the back of my mind, telling me I wasn't alone. I parked my RV at the base of the ridge, the forest thick and dense around me. The ridge itself loomed above like some ancient monolith, cloaked in pines and mist that twisted between the branches, even in the middle of the day. I set up a small campfire and checked my equipment, making sure everything was in working order. This was supposed to be a 4-day trip, long enough to disconnect, but not so long that I'd start talking to myself. First night in, the quiet felt different. The trees around my campsite were thick with shadows, darker than they should have been, even by firelight. I told myself it was just me, just my brain adjusting to the silence after so many months of noise. It wasn't until the strange sound started that I began to doubt my instincts. I'd just started drifting off in my camp chair when I heard it, a low rustling followed by a soft snap like a twig breaking. I sat up, instantly alert, scanning the perimeter with my flashlight. Nothing, just trees, the fire crackling, and darkness beyond the reach of the light. But the sound kept coming, closer and closer. It was footsteps, I realized, slow, deliberate, circling my camp. I tried to reason it away. Maybe it was an animal or the wind. But deep down, I knew the truth. Someone or something was out there. I stayed awake until the first light of dawn, clutching my flashlight like a lifeline. The next morning, I tried to brush it off. I've spent nights outdoors, and I know the sounds animals make, how they move. But whatever had been circling my camp, it had sounded too precise, too human. Still, daylight brought confidence, and I convinced myself it was just my imagination, fueled by my own stress. To distract myself, I planned a day hike, something to take my mind off the strange night. I packed my bag, checked my satellite phone, compass, and flashlight. But when I turned on the phone, it was dead. I'd charged it fully the night before, but now the screen stayed black, refusing to come to life. My flashlight was the same, the batteries drained completely. It didn't make any sense, but I pushed down the unease and decided to go hiking anyway. It was a clear day and the ridge was well marked. I wouldn't get lost. As I hiked, I tried to focus on the sounds of nature, the birds, the wind rustling the leaves. But the silence crept in around me, swallowing up the noises. And as I climbed higher, a new sound reached my ears. Footsteps, faint and distant but distinct. Every time I stopped to listen, they faded, only to return when I started walking again, as if following. I sped up, trying to outpace the sound, but it stayed with me, relentless. After a couple of hours, I found myself at a rocky outcrop overlooking the valley below. For a moment, I felt relief, taking in the view. That's when I caught a glimpse of something between the trees, a shadow, dark and twisted, flitting just out of sight. It was gone before I could fully process it. My first instinct was to call out, maybe convince myself it was another hiker. But something in me held back, a warning whisper from somewhere deep inside. Don't call it. Don't let it know you see it. I hurried back to camp, ignoring the whispers of paranoia that had started to seep in. When I finally got back, I saw that things had moved. My knife, my map, even a water bottle I'd left near the fire, all gone. I searched the perimeter, sure I'd just misplaced them, but they were nowhere. That night, the footsteps returned, closer this time, circling just beyond the fire's light. I sat by the fire, gripping my backup flashlight, praying it would stay charged. Every so often, I'd hear a low, muffled sound, almost like a whisper, and then a voice, soft, distant, but unmistakable. Mark. My blood ran cold. It was her voice, my ex's voice, the sound of her calling my name, gentle the way she used to. But she wasn't here. She was back in the city, probably out with someone else by now. I shook my head, trying to rid myself of the sound, but it persisted, circling with the footsteps. "Mark, come here." It was closer now, impossibly close, like she was right behind me. I spun around, flashing the light into the trees, but there was nothing, just shadows that twisted and shifted as though mocking me. I forced myself to sit down to breathe, convincing myself it was just in my head, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was there, watching. By the third day, I knew I was in trouble. The satellite phone was still dead, and now my compass refused to work, the needle spinning erratically, refusing to settle. I was beginning to feel the weight of the silence pressing down, heavy and all-consuming. Every so often, I'd catch sight of movement in the corner of my eye, a dark shape lurking just out of reach. It never showed itself fully, never came close enough for me to see. But it was there, always there, waiting. I spent the day trying to keep my mind occupied, but the isolation was relentless, twisting every little sound and shadow into something sinister. By dusk, I was exhausted, my nerves frayed. I decided to cut the trip short. If I could get back to my RV by nightfall, I could make it down the ridge and out of these woods by morning. But the forest had other plans. As I packed up, I heard it again. Footsteps closing in, slower this time, deliberate, and then my voice calling out from somewhere deep in the woods. "Help, please." I froze. It was my voice, echoing back at me, distorted, desperate. But I hadn't spoken. I hadn't made a sound. My throat tightened as I realized what was happening. Whatever this thing was, it was using my own voice against me, mimicking me, trying to lure me off course. I forced myself to keep packing, pushing the voice away. Then I heard it closer, so close it was almost in my ear. "Help me! Don't leave me here!" I knew it was a trick, but it sounded so real, so convincing, that doubt clawed at me, pulling me toward the woods. I took a step forward, then another, feeling the darkness pull at me like an invisible hand reaching out. But then I stopped. The voice shifted, twisting, and I caught a glimpse of it again, a shape hidden behind the trees, just out of sight. It was tall, with limbs too long and shadows too deep to be human. I stumbled back, heart pounding, realizing I was dealing with something beyond reason, something that thrived on fear and isolation. I ran. My mind was a blur, every instinct screaming to get back to my RV, to put as much distance as possible between me and that thing. I crashed through the trees, the voice trailing behind me, calling my name, shifting between my voice and hers, echoing in that twisted, mocking tone. But I didn't look back. I couldn't. Finally, I broke through the trees and saw it. The ridge, with my RV parked at the base, waiting. Relief flooded over me, and I sprinted the last stretch, throwing myself into the RV and slamming the door shut. I locked it, barricading myself inside, breathing hard as the silence returned. For a moment, everything was still. Just me, the RV, and the soft hum of the engine as I turned it on. I was safe. But as I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and my heart stopped. Standing at the edge of the forest was a figure, dark and distorted, watching me. Its face flickered, shifting between shapes, mine, hers, something monstrous and hollow-eyed. It raised a hand, waving slowly as if mocking me. And as I drove away, the voice followed, echoing in the back of my mind, soft and taunting. "Don't leave me here, Mark. I'll be waiting." Even now, miles away from Blackwater Ridge, the silence feels heavier, as though something's still watching, waiting for the day I return. I never really believed in ghosts. Superstition, sure, but only in that passing, humorous way you hear around campfires or while watching some B-movie. I didn't come to the Smokies to find spirits, not even close. But, as I look back now, I wonder how I could have missed the signs from the start. We were here to make a documentary on Appalachian ghost stories, to capture a sense of those haunted places locals always talk about but rarely visit. Klingman's Dome, deep in the Great Smoky Mountains, was perfect for our shoot. The place had a reputation, and we hoped to pull some eerie footage from the stories surrounding it. Our little team, just 4 of us, was close enough to manage well, but different enough to keep things interesting. Rachel was our leader and the practical one of the group. A former EMT who knew the outdoors better than anyone, she took survival as seriously as some people take their morning coffee. I'd worked with her for years and knew her no-nonsense style like the back of my hand. Then there was Jay, our camera guy, the thrill-seeker who had more confidence than was good for him. He thought our trips were a shortcut to becoming the next big indie filmmaker. Tina was our researcher, a bit of a believer too, always fascinated by the supernatural and the stories it left behind. And me, Eric, the sound guy, here for the job and nothing more. If it wasn't for the paycheck, I'd rather be at a cabin with Wi-Fi and reliable power outlets. Our first day was full of your typical lost-in-nature problems. Some equipment, crucial stuff like our generator and thermal camera, was ruined by a sudden downpour that soaked through our bags. Rachel was frustrated but pragmatic as ever, planning a workaround and pushing on. Me, I was already annoyed. There was no point in being there if we couldn't get decent footage, but Rachel said we'd make do, and in the back of her mind, I knew she had a thing about not giving up on the trip. It was Tina who first mentioned the Cherokee legend of Spearfinger. I barely listened as she went on about this shape-shifting spirit that could mimic voices and appearances, tricking people to come close, then drawing them in with the twist of her stone-cold, spear-like finger. I laughed it off. Jay, too. But Tina's voice took on this low, somber tone as she explained it. "It's said she'll appear as someone familiar," she murmured, her eyes fixed on the fire. "Someone you trust, and she's a patient spirit. She'll wear you down, draw you in." Nothing like a little Cherokee ghost story to keep things interesting, right? I joked, nudging Rachel. She just gave me a look that told me to drop it. By that night, a thick mist had settled in. The mist wasn't forecasted, yet here it was, smothering the trees and swallowing the stars. We gathered close by the fire, each of us a bit more alert than usual. Tina kept glancing over her shoulder like she was expecting something to crawl out of the fog, while Jay seemed more excited than anything. It was the kind of excitement that made me roll my eyes, but I didn't say anything. That was when I started hearing it. A faint whisper, my name. But it wasn't anyone from our group. It was soft, familiar, like a memory from years ago. I was about to say something, but then I heard Jay pipe up. "Did you guys hear that?" he asked, sounding almost breathless with excitement. "I swear, I heard my brother's voice." He chuckled. "Probably just the wind, right?" Tina gave him a worried glance, but he brushed it off. And that was just the start. Each of us seemed to hear something, a sound or voice that felt personal, intimate. Rachel looked tense, her jaw set like she was trying to ignore it. We stayed close to the fire, maybe a little longer than we should have until sleep finally got the better of us. The next morning, I woke up to find half our gear gone. My bag was missing, along with Rachel's utility knife and a few flashlights. Just gone. I asked Jay if he'd done something with it, but he looked as lost as I felt. "It wasn't us, Eric," Rachel said. "We were all asleep. But look at this." She pointed at the ground around our camp. Small piles of rocks and sticks lay arranged in strange symbols, spread in a rough circle around us. Rachel didn't touch them, her lips pressed tight. Tina, meanwhile, looked like she was about to faint. "It's a sign," she whispered. "The Cherokee used to make offerings like this, protections, but someone, or something, left them here." Her voice trailed off, her gaze darting through the trees as though she expected something to come out at any second. Jay decided to wander off for footage later that afternoon. Rachel's warnings be damned. He came back looking a little rattled. Said he saw something moving, a shadow, or maybe even Rachel herself. But something was off. She'd been back at camp the whole time, of course, but he was insistent. We just shrugged it off as an overactive imagination. By that evening, though, I could feel the fears starting to creep into our group. There was an uneasy silence, each of us darting glances into the darkening woods. That's when I started to hear it again. A voice that sounded like Rachel, but hollow, distant, as if she were calling me from somewhere deep in the mist. "Eric," the voice called, soft and almost soothing. "Eric, come here." I glanced over at Rachel, who was busy muttering instructions to Jay about positioning the camera. There was no way it was her voice I'd just heard. My skin prickled with the feeling I couldn't shake, something pulling me toward the edge of the campsite, into the mist. But I didn't go. I held back, my heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with the hike. And in the morning, things were even worse. Jay was missing. He'd left his camera behind, his pack, everything. We followed some faint footprints into the woods, calling out for him, but all we heard was silence, broken only by faint whispers that came from all directions and none at all. Tina's face was pale, and I could tell she was barely holding it together. When we finally found Jay, he was alone, crouched low against a tree, looking dazed and different. A thin, red scratch ran up his arm, sharp and too clean, almost surgical. He just stared at us, hollow-eyed, like he didn't even know who we were. What happened, Jay?" Rachel's voice was tense, her gaze flickering between him and the mist around us. I thought I saw my brother," he whispered, his voice shaking. "And then, it was you, Rachel. But it wasn't you." He looked down at the scratch on his arm, his voice trailing off. Tina let out a small gasp, covering her mouth. "Spearfinger," she whispered, her voice trembling. "She's real. She marks you, and then she waits." Rachel dismissed it at first, but as the day wore on, it became harder and harder to deny that something was wrong. Jay was acting strange, distant, his face paler and his eyes sunken, and that night the whispers came back with a vengeance. Around midnight, I took my turn keeping watch, sitting by the dying embers of the fire with my flashlight aimed out into the shadows. That's when I saw her, a figure in the mist, flickering in and out of the darkness. She looked like Rachel, but distorted, twisted, her face shadowed and hollow. "Eric," she whispered, beckoning me forward with a motion that was slow and unnatural, her arm bending at an angle that no human arm should. I froze, my heart pounding, and I stumbled backward, my flashlight flickering. The others woke up, Rachel and Tina grabbing onto me, and that's when I saw it. The figure in the mist shifted, changing, its face contorting into Jay's for a moment before fading back into the shadows. "We need to leave," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "We're not alone here. She's real." Rachel tried to keep us calm, but I could see the terror in her eyes. Tina started reciting some old Cherokee prayer under her breath, her voice trembling. She told us it might help, that it might keep the spirit at bay, but I could see the fear etched into every line on her face. By dawn, Jay was gone for good. We found his camera at the edge of the woods, the footage inside a chaotic mess of shadows, indistinct faces, and a single, haunting voice whispering, "Come here." Desperation set in, and we began to gather our remaining gear, ready to abandon the trip entirely. But as we reached the edge of the mist, Spearfinger appeared, no longer hiding. She stood there, shifting between Jay's face, Rachel's face, and something else. A monstrous figure with cold, empty eyes and a long, gleaming finger that ended in a sharp, razor-like point. In a last, desperate act, Rachel remembered the legend, grabbing stones from the ground and hurling them at the creature. "It's her weakness. Stones, rocks, anything hard," she shouted, her voice raw with fear. I joined her, and to our shock, the creature recoiled, its form flickering, dark and wispy, as though it was coming apart. It shrieked, a sound so piercing and hollow that it felt like it sliced through my bones. We ran, sprinting through the woods, stumbling over rocks and roots, the mist finally lifting as we broke through to the parking lot where our RV was parked. Tina and I collapsed in the RV, and Rachel turned on the ignition, not looking back. We didn't stop driving until we reached the nearest town hours later. Only then did I dare to look in the rearview mirror, and what I saw chilled me to my core. A faint figure stood at the edge of the woods, its face shifting, Jay's features flickering between familiar and monstrous, a hand raised in a twisted, mocking wave. It called out in Jay's voice, in a voice that I knew I would never forget. And even as we left, I knew some part of us was still there, trapped in that endless mist with her.